Hello, welcome to the sermon you're not getting this week. Today we're looking at Isaiah 55, verses 10 through 13. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there until they have watered the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and succeed in the thing for which I have sent it. For you shall go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorn shall come up the cypress, instead of the brier shall come up the myrtle, and it shall be to the Lord for a memorial, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. Here ends our reading. So, Sunday, after I got home, Larissa and I decided we are going to bike out to a local pool in Lincoln. So we got on our bikes and we headed over to the pool. On the way to the pool, we're riding in a residential street in Lincoln. I heard a popping sound over my head, and I knew what that sound meant. I'd heard that sound before. So I hurried as fast as I could, and thankfully Larissa stopped, and right between us, a tree limb fell, crashed into the street, and shattered into a few pieces. It would have killed me. It would have killed me if it had landed on me. But the first thing I did was I turned around, I stopped my bike, turned around, looked at Larissa, and said, "Good thing I had my helmet on." Trees cannot make an everlasting memorial. The last line of this text here, it doesn't really make sense, right? No matter how healthy a myrtle or a cypress is, it will die, and its limbs will get rotten, and they will fall. Now, there are trees that are exceptionally old. There are trees that are over 1,000 years old in the world. But trees won't last forever, and I don't know about myrtles and cypresses, but I don't think those are the kind of trees that live to be, those 2,000-year-old trees that you hear about. Those trees are beautiful, and they make a great spot for birds to eat, especially myrtles. They're beautiful. Birds eat the berries. They have beautiful flowers, but they'll die. They can't be an everlasting memorial. Now, when humans think about making an everlasting memorial, a memory, an everlasting sign, we think of something carved in stone or made with metal. Even our art, art that was painted 200 or 300 years ago with good care by people who study it, museum curators, they can do a good job of preserving that art, and it can last long after the people who initially made it are dead. It can last seemingly forever. In our architecture, we have buildings that take more than a lifetime to build, and then they stay around for generations upon generations. We know how to make things last a really long time. The pyramids are still up, and those are thousands and thousands of years old. They're incredibly ancient structures, and they're still up. Humans know how to make everlasting signs. We know how to make good memorials. Why does God make everlasting signs out of myrtle trees and rainbows? Well, one way to look at this might be that the reason humans make long-lasting signs and art, the reason we're consumed with things that will last beyond our time is because we know that we will die. We know that we are finite, so we want our art to echo through the ages. We want it to be infinite. God doesn't have the same problem. God will outlast trees. God will outlast our art. God will even outlast the pyramids. God is eternal. And God doesn't need to worry about the perspective of the finite, so God can paint with things that are transient, that are temporary. part of the reason that I think God might do this is because it is transient and temporary. God's glory is manifested in the myrtle and the cypress and the rainbow because they're only there for a while. They're weak, they're fragile compared to God. We see the power and love and awe of God reflected in things that are finite and weak and helpless and sometimes defenseless. We see God at work in making beautiful the things that are small. And I think we could say the same thing is true of us. God chooses humans, God chooses finite people, chooses our lives to tell a story of God's love. In our finitude, we see the everlasting nature of God made manifest. In our weakness, we see God's power expressed. In the moments where we fail to love one another as we ought to love one another, we see the love of God coming to life to make up for our shortcomings. God tells a story with our lives, not carving a story into stone. This is not to say that God can't carve out of stone, but I think God chooses to work with our lives and with trees and bushes and shrubs and living things because they are dynamic. There's movement, there's motion. It's a little unpredictable. It's sometimes hard to follow. It's complicated. And we see God's handiwork in that. This complexity, this uncertainty, this imperfection tells a story that glorifies God. It is such a good thing to be here, to be alive, to be a human, even if it's hard to get by, even if there's a lot of difficult things in our world that make us want to close our eyes and shut our ears and block out the world. It's good for us to be here in this world, to be finite, to be imperfect. May our lives, as humble and imperfect as they may be, continue in our own way to give glory to the amazing story of God. God is creating art out of our humble, imperfect lives. And may we do in our own ways what we can to glorify God and show God's love. Thanks be to God. Amen.